Okay, hello everybody. Here is a study guide video for the second quiz that we're going to be having next week. Remember, it's going to be 25 questions. You'll have an hour to complete. It's going to be on chapters 6, 7, and 8. So if we look at 6, remember we talked about political action and things that people do in order to kind of express themselves, whether it's maybe anti-war, pro-civil rights, pro-reproductive rights. It's all some type of political action that we have. Also, know things like individual expression that people may do, whether it's voting or hanging a sign in their yard or maybe putting a bumper sticker. That could be considered, types of individual expression. And, it can tie into activism as well. We can be motivated to take some type of position on a public policy and let other people know about it, whether it's through social media or through some type of individual expression. Um, we also have political professionals, and we talked a little bit about that. And these are people that, kind of, take money to engage in some type of political activity, whether it's a lobbyist or somebody that is trying to push a special interest. Remember, we talked a little bit about Down's paradox and Down's view on low voter turnout. And, one of the things was potential voters might use a kind of a cost benefit analysis when they decide whether or not to vote. Is it worth the time to go out and learn about the issues? Is it worth the time to take off work and go to the polling places? Is it worth the time to get a mail-in ballot and look at everything and fill it out and send it back in? It's all kind of ties into is it a rational choice to vote or not? Know about petitioning and especially in China, and how the Chinese people, the government has a responsibility to hear citizens' complaints. On a one-party state, that's a very interesting topic that we had in that section. Know about the spreading of the social networks, such as whether it's Twitter or Instagram or whatever. And this has really gotten young people involved and Generation Z involved in politics, because I think your generation is a lot more informed than my generation was when I was coming out of high school. Um, Also know about voter turnout in France and kind of the ideational explanation about how come there might not be a high amount of participation in the French elections. Um, know about traditional liberalism and political values or social creation, and not necessarily individual uh, participation type deal. Know also the institutional approach to whether or not somebody votes on election day. Um, let's go ahead and go to chapter 7. All right, so chapter 7 talks a little bit about liberal democracies. So let's kind of bring this up, and we'll talk about chapter 7 right now. So, um, you know, there's been some talk, especially in different parts of the world, if we should have quotas for legislatures. A descriptive uh, system would be that we have some type of quota for gender to be part of government. Um, know about proportional representation and how countries like Iraq have, different ethnic groups, and some of these ethnic groups have seats in the legislature that are reserved for, different ethnic groups. Know that we here in the United States use a single member plurality, right? So we have individual districts. We have 435 different districts here in the United States, and people will vote for their representative, and those are each called single member districts. Know the concept of overrepresentation, maybe having too many of the same groups in the legislature. Know what a single member plurality is, and how single member pluralities lead to a representation of people, while proportional representation kind of leads to a representation of ideas. Kind of a conflicting thing there. Know what gerrymandering is. You guys probably know that from U.S. history, and Governor Jerry from Massachusetts cutting up a piece of Boston that resembled a salamander. That's how we got the concept of gerrymandering. Know what a parliamentary system of government is, and how you may have a divided government in a parliamentary system as well, because at times, sometimes the majority party will be able to really impose their will on the minority party. And even though in some parliamentary systems there are multi parties, but sometimes the parties have to click together if they want to get anything passed, especially if the majority party doesn't have or maybe the better term would be the plurality party, that not necessarily has the 51% to pass a bill, but they may need to click with another party to get up to that 51%. You guys know the system of checks and balances. We talked about that, and you guys probably had that in U.S. history, and know what a presidential system is, and how we have the concept of having a charismatic leader in charge of the country. Know what a runoff is, and especially how if somebody doesn't get a majority of vote in the primary election, the top two vote getters might have to go to a runoff. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to number 8. So here in chapter 8, we just reviewed it. So you guys need to watch the second part on the async section, and we talked a lot about policy making. Know the stages of policy making here. Maybe finding the first stage where you identify a problem and you go all the way through the cycle to the point where you implement it, and then you reevaluate whether or not the bill is possible or feasible. Know what a presidential veto does and what stage it comes in. All know that probably from U.S. history as well. Also know what a no confidence is, and how some legislatures are reluctant to cast a no confidence vote because it might affect them, and it might affect their seat in the future. Know about the Italian Parliament from 1988 and how they made it nearly impossible for party leaders to control rank and file members, just due to the factions that happened in some of the parties there. Know what legislative autonomy is, and that concept that a system elects legislatures and executives through separate methods, much like what we have here in the United States, where we vote for Congress in one election and we vote for the president in another, in the same general election, but as not a ticket like we do in other countries. Also know where the president and the legislatures will each have their own electoral base. We could have a Congress that's a majority of Democrats and a Republican president. So, sometimes a president will have their own kind of their own type of followers, much like what we saw with President Trump. Know that Congress is probably the least popular branch of government here in the U.S. Know a patronage, and we talked a little bit about patronage and how a lot of jobs are given to political supporters. Know about the justice system that we talked about. One thing that's kind of weird about the American system is that federal judges are nominated by the president and then appointed for life to the bench. But in the states, the state judges are usually elected officials, and you're nominated by the governor, then you're put into place, and then you have to run for re-election. So in a sense, it becomes a political job. Know what common law is, and where judges are supposed to be neutral observers and not supposed to get involved in a trial, just kind of a neutral arbitrator. Know what judicial review is. You guys know that it came from Marbury versus Madison, which gives the ability to the courts to determine whether or not a law is constitutional. And that's the concept of judicial review, and how we were able to have that type of check on either the president or Congress, and how it is very effective. And remember, the only other check on judicial review is to declare a constitutional amendment or to pass a constitutional amendment, and we know how hard that is. All right, so that's what I got. If you have any questions, definitely let me know. All right, thank you.